as Hafladay, also known as Shithead by some people. And we're going to talk some physics. Yeah, that'll be fun.
No.
I know you. I mean, I can see you liking the idea of fields that aren't made out of, magic inspiration, like where things are communicating with each other through magic powers or something. And
Mm,
so the one thing I'd say that another one of the things going for this idea of a material theory of gravity is that it creates the communication medium. It basically explains why things are reacting is because they're sending gravity back and forth to each other, and that is the medium essentially that everything is swimming in,
mm,
from the atomic nucleus to the nebula in space. They're all being influenced by this field of massive field of particles, which is essentially a medium.
yeah. I'm just thinking what we should call it, because I think we both agreed we don't like the concepts of magical number fields that that don't do anything else other than um, they're yeah they're what's the word?
Arbitrary.
Ephemeral.
They're made up. Yeah, they're.
I've been arguing with people about the nature of logic and abstract things, but there's nothing more abstract than a field, because you're saying there's these numbers at these points, and it's where's the numbers stored? What is it's just nonsense.
Yeah,
To my
the only way I could make any use out of it is if you went much larger than the Planck constant, and then you established that certain areas have a density. But the idea of giving a photon a number would be kind of ludicrous. Its number is its association. So without its associations, they don't mean anything. I mean, I can take 500 fish, right? And if I spread them out over 500 miles, they don't mean anything. If I
mm,
spread them all on the top of a pin, then they mean something.
mm. Well, I think the notion's useful. It's just you know I don't mind the physics establishment. I think just the same way you think is they misportray what the story is, and they try to pretend it's more concrete than it is. Now, that would be the criticism that I have of some of your theories, is that it's difficult to. I'm equally skeptical of both your theory and the existing theory in terms of, well, in some aspects, let's say.
Well. Let's see. Okay, I'll grant the some aspects qualification. I'm just saying. I mean, if you're going to say they're equally, I don't think they are. I mean, obviously from my perspective, I think it's just. I think I have a huge intuitive advantage if I'm materializing the fields, and then I can unify them by the same material. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I do have some continuity, and it also does the time dilation thing as a bonus. So I'm just saying I do have those things to my advantage. I would say that, to illustrate your point, you sent me a link to a new MIT video. It's newer than the old Levin videos.
Yeah,
And this guy starts off with exactly what you're talking about, in my opinion, in the sense he's using metaphors to describe physics. And you're saying, well, why, instead of talking about black and white, and I think he was using what, heavy and light, or some.
yeah.
So he's using
Black and white,
qualifiers,
and, yeah,
right, that are completely abstract to the reality.
yeah.
And he's creating a black box and calling that an experiment. And you're just saying, well, if you can't talk about the real physics,
Yeah.
doesn't that really mean that what you're talking is bullshit? I mean, if you can't use the real example, why
Mm,
are you metaphoring it into unicorns? Why are you
yeah.
changing its complete structure into something you can control? And then he's talking in complete absolutes. It's an absolute fact that we know every variable and we know everything that's going on, and this is the paradox. And
Mm.
yeah, based on your premise that those absolutes are true, sure, you win. It's a paradox. But your
But
absolutes are really, really weak.
I think that's it. I think they presume you're an idiot, you know, when they do all this metaphoring, and that your latest video was really good, and you know, and well, you've said it before, and I guess it didn't strike me hard enough. You know, they always tell this story about, you know, if we shoot bullets through the holes, we get lumps, you know, and if it's only one hole, we get one pile of lumps. And you like say, well, here, you know, there's a guy talking, and they always tell the story like, oh, look, it's got all the wave patterns now. You get the fucking wave patterns with one slit. Why should I be like all gooey about the wave pattern when you get it with one slit, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think it's really good. You've undermined. I've always been skeptical of the physics establishment, and I'd always worried like they built these accelerators, and it was like some kind of mafia, you know, like, shit, don't tell anybody that we're like spending these billions of pounds and we're just making this shit up, you know.
And it almost looks, it's almost like the iWatch, right? You know, the Apple Watch or something. It's like, yeah, now they're getting so silly, you know, that, you know, now where do you go from here to double preposterous? And so, yeah, when you know, all you have to do is look at the instrumentality they're using to see with. And you're saying if you've got to use glasses that funky, you know, if you're using glasses that weigh 10 tons, your eyesight must suck. And you're just saying, you know, how many defects? You know, we see it all the time, right? Just put a lens in an experiment, and everything goes kind of wacky, you know. And they have lens times the speed of light squared, you know, in their instrumentality. And you're saying, what are they really looking at? What they're looking at, or are they looking at the, you know, a big giant piles and piles of artifacts?
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you've given me a lot more skepticism, but I'm still nowhere near as skeptic as you know, I think, because I was quite pleased to see you. You know, there was the neutrinos faster than the speed of light business, you know, and they hounded that shit down, and you know they dismissed that, and then recently there's been have you heard about these gravitational waves? Yeah. And you know, there was a whole host of people saying we've discovered gravitational waves, and from I forgot what the name. The South Pole, is it? They've been doing this study. What was it called? Something 2. Anyway, but the point is it was, what's the word? Validating or something to see the scientific community scrutinize those results and say, no, you've not discovered, you know. So I'm not as, there's still plenty I believe in.
It scares me that they will do this, though. I mean, come on, it's like, look at the experiments of, you know, credible places like NASA, you know, with this stupid arsenic life form, and they did all this hype. Remember the microbe meteorites, and I mean, you know, these are, you know, this is, you know, who can you trust anymore? And now, you know, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about dark matter, maybe.
Yeah.
That's another subject where it's all veiled in, you know, this, you know, again, it's like, you know, you can see how they've trashed Newton. I mean, you watch Pyro Talk or something, it's like Newton was wiping his ass, or, you know, like he was like the dumbest man on earth or something. Like everything Newton has been unraveled. And no, 99.999% of Newton is solid as a rock. And it's only this on the fringes, quote unquote, right, where Newton breaks down. And now they're going to do the, you know, in a sense, you know, I think they're afraid to do that to Einstein, because now they're totally glued to general and whatever the other one, relativity theories. And these relativity theories are premised on, you know, you've seen the math. I mean, you know, wow.
No, I just saw a BBC documentary the other day, and you always see this. You see, if you watch one on general relativity, they'll tell you this is the greatest theory ever, yeah. And then the next week there'll be one on quantum mechanics, and they'll tell you that's the greatest thing ever. And the week after there'll be one saying, do we know nothing at all? Is it all bullshit? You know what I mean? And it depends what they're trying to sell you, and it's just a different set of people, you know, you can see the bias
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the
So this
story that they have to sell.
this is another place where I'd say my theory changes the explanation. Okay, I don't do the Einstein space is making it happen thing. I'm doing the gravity is making it happen thing. So when I say when I'm accepting the fact that there's gravitational lensing, I'm saying the gravitational lensing isn't being created by gravity, it's being created by the consequence of gravity, which is that there's always a dense field of particles in the atmosphere, so to speak, quote unquote, around any massive body. Any massive body is going to be collecting dust, essentially, right? And lots of it in its atmosphere. The sun has a huge corona. I mean, a huge field of very dense, atomic particles, constituent particles, ions, let's call them, right? And that those ions are what's really doing the lensing. And so you could theorize that the more active body, like a sun, or the younger, say, a planet, or a gravity field, let's just call it a gravity field in space, like a nebula, it would show much more gravity based on lensing, by Einstein's lensing theory. So if you're going to use lensing as a way of seeing gravity, right, and that's what they're doing, that all breaks down if Einstein is incorrect, right? If there's no direct relationship between gravity and lensing, then those approximations that there has to be more matter are entirely wrong, and that their visual observations are correct. So now they have this conflict between visual observations and lensing. The lensing says there's more mass. The visual observations say not enough mass. So well, enough mass, but not enough to explain the lensing. And so, the entire theory of dark matter and dark energy, as far as I can see, I'm just going by my knowledge base, which isn't extensive, but as far as I can see, is all based on Einstein's assumption. So without Einstein's assumption regarding lensing, there is no need to invent dark energy or dark matter.
Yeah, well, the thing is as a model, yeah, you're right. But the problem is I think even by Newton's law of gravitation, there's something broken in the sites. In terms of quantitatively.
Yeah, well, that I have an explanation for too. So I would say that we're all searching for explanations for the fact that things look different, and part of my theory is that gravity is this pressure gradient, and quite obviously at the end of the universe the gradient breaks down, and that's why everything at the end of the universe appears to be accelerating extremely fast. I mean, the things that are 15 billion light years away that we see are always incredibly redshifted. So they're moving incredibly fast. And not incredibly, I say, whatever, half the speed of light, which is very fast for very dense suns and, neutrinos.
They're approaching the speed of light. I mean,
neutron stars and stuff. And the reason why they are, I'm just saying that the reason why they are moving so fast is there's no gravity from the external universe pushing them back, right? So they're on the one side of the pressure gradient. So they're not inside the pressure gradient, they're outside the pressure gradient. So like outside the nuclear explosion, they're the particles moving the quickest.
Yeah, I can follow that intuitively, but and I will not dwell on it. I've made certain criticisms, and the problem is with that being an intuitive, plausible answer for it is what they would say is the quantitativeness. The Einstein theory has actually numbers that can map to the results we're seeing, whereas that kind of description. I know that,
but they're catch-22 numbers, aren't they? I remember one video you actually did mention that there's whole aspects of the mathematical formula that are only intended to take away any number over 0.9 and any number under 0.3. So if the answer comes out 0.3, it's annihilated into a 1, by the mathematics. So it's basically a range mathematics. It's basically conceding this math won't work if the object is this heavy, and this math won't work if the object is this light. And that's in Einstein's, that's in his constants, and it's in part of his mathematics is doing that very thing. It's error checking. It's basically saying this math won't work, so we're going to make up an answer when it's heavy or light.
I'm not sure to which. I do a lot of videos pointing out various things. I think I'm not sure specifically to what you're talking about. I know, you know, in general relativity, they introduced the constant for the like the positive pressure of gravity, didn't they? Rather than the, you know, the pushing side of gravity rather than the pulling. They introduced constant. That's one of the problems I have with physics and maths even. It seems as though once you're beyond experiments, you can actually make up what you want. You can get the data, you know, and you have 2 points, and you can bridge to it and say, but it doesn't, and the people believe that bridge is somehow reality.
Right, and they believe that these experiments have been done, which is another problem, because we don't have any evidence that there's been any correlation between actual experimental data and any of Einstein's theories, right? None of them are connected to actual experiments. You know what I'm saying, on the massive scale. But anyway, to bring to that point, okay, there's a guy I lecture online, and I've watched some of his videos, heavy on math, you know, this guy. But anyway, so he was doing a video on the 1 and the 2 slit experiment and doing the math, you know, and it was just kind of funny because he calls it wave interference when it's 2 slits, and then he calls it diffraction when it's 1 slit. But he explains the diffraction by using wave interference, right? So he's using the very thing that he said, you know, that he's calling something else in the 2 slit experiment. And what it made obvious to me was that I can create an experiment to validate, to prove, okay, whether it's one thing or the other, because this is a simple case where he's basically saying the single slit, what's happening is the beam of light is interfering with other beams of light, you know what I mean? So it's not like one photon is interfering with itself. Instead, it's one photon's interfering with its neighbor photon, right? So that one obviously could be eliminated by just doing this single photon jazz that they say they can do. So this is a perfect experiment for the single photon thing. So if you can send single photons through a single slit and get no diffraction pattern, okay, then you'll be proving some of this quantum nonsense. But until you do that, you're not going to be able to prove to me that 2 photons ever interfere with itself, you know, and that they nullify each other and all of that stuff. So I'm just saying I've got that math nailed, because here's a guy using math, okay, that won't apply if it's single photons. If it's single photons, he can't use it. Okay, it's nullified. So I'm just saying I can nullify it, and then what he did, I'll just bring it real quick. I don't want to get too specific on something you haven't seen, but what they do for this math is, you know, they make these angles theta, and then do the multiplication based on the phase differences created by the distance difference, right? And so it was so arbitrary, because what they do is they take 1/3 of the distance of the slit, and then they split that into thirds. And they say these two interfered with each other, and this third section is left over, and that's creating the pattern. And you're just saying, you're just saying to yourself, well, how arbitrary is that? You've decided to take 1/3 of the slit pattern, and then you've used 1/3 of the 1/3, and to create your 1/9. Well, of course you come up with 1/9. Of course you do. 3 times 3 is 9. Of course the second maxima will turn out to be, 9 times less than the first maxima, because you just guaranteed it in your math. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm just saying that the math is entirely situational, entirely convoluted, like arbitrary. You know, like I said, they don't explain how they came up with this 1/3, except because it fit, right? It's the only way they could make it work. And this is math engineered to answer a problem, not math that explains. You get me? It's engineered math.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying, is that it seems to me, in a sense, that mathematics is so powerful that you can engineer it to fit the data, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I could create a mathematical fractal that makes human beings. You know what I mean? That comes up with enough variety. I could throw enough errors in it to make enough variety, and here I could just say, look, human beings are a fractal.
Exactly. That's the thing. I mean, you know, obviously we can't, you know, but it's the point. Yeah, that's exactly my point. Is that mathematics is so powerful. If you dig it deep enough in one area, and if it's fractal or vector spaces or wiggle woggle string theory, if you just keep digging, you'll find a way to connect that data in some sort of way.
You know, you got me thinking about just when you said vector, because you know there was vector images. You know, on on the internet originally, it was all vector images because you could reduce an image to a tiny amount of data, you know, a formula, and draw a pretty good picture. You know what I'm saying? It was a graphic. It wasn't really a picture, but you know what I'm saying. But the fact is that the math of a curve takes up less data, you know, than actually the distance of all the pixels. So if you don't have to draw all the pixels and all you do is give you the formula to draw the pixels yourself, you know, it's obviously a big data saver. If I can just explain you as a bunch of vector lines, you know, mathematical lines, and reduce you to that, I can send you somewhere very efficiently, you know. But I'm just saying that's an example where you're clearly just engineering math to duplicate a representation. You're creating math that will make that thing happen.
Have you heard of? I've been talking about it on and off, just saying it exists. Have you heard of the entropy explanation of gravity?
Well, I mean, I've heard of the fact that gravity is, you know, I'm conceding that by my definition, the entire universe will turn into photons going that away, and that's all there'll be. There'll be no more matter. Everything will disintegrate into photons moving about their way. Because once gravity disappears, gravity does disappear. The pressure does dissipate, and once the gravity's gone, every atomic structure will disintegrate.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering whether you'd heard me mention it or you knew anything about it, because you know how, like, the basics, when you're basically introduced to entropy, usually you think about a gas in a box, so to speak, and you know, if it's violently, you know, when it's cooled, it's less entropy, and when it's violently, you know, heated, they're all vibrating about, and there's more entropy, and it's a statistical aspect of like lots of balls bouncing about. Now, somebody recently, relatively recently, a bit of a pun there, has derived the Einstein field equations. That's the hugely complicated tensor matrices shit that everybody talks about in general. Well, they've derived those very equations by thinking about entropy, and that strikes me as very similar to this. Who was the guy who first proposed this theory of
Lesage,
yeah, and that yourself is advocating. To me, the fact that you can derive the Einstein's equations from entropy is very similar to the idea of this ether of balls.
Well, that's what sort of annoys me about the unified
mathematical equivalence between looking at gravity as balls, or sort of a fabric of space distortion. And you know,
well, they're both creating pressure is the point, right? I mean, that would be my argument, is that my definition isn't any different. I mean, it's still a convergence, right? So by definition, we're just saying here's the convergence that we know exists, right? So the convergence is gravity, and so you can find it always is going to have to match, no matter what you have to explain that convergence, whether you dimple space, you know, whether you have mass dimple space, or whether I have a flood of particles pushing in. It's exactly the same mechanism, right? You're just talking about the pressure. So,
Yeah.
and what causes the pressure gradient? So my shadowing thing does exactly the same thing as Einstein's down thing. I'm just making it a shadow in reality instead of a magical space fabric that we can't define how it exists. I'm just saying it's a medium. My
Mm.
medium is a real thing. Their medium is this presumption that the universe itself has a structure that's a fabric.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just saying that it's exactly the same convergence, though. So we're both living in the same reality. So I don't even say that those people that come up with this field theories, this unified field theory, where they do this arbitrary number thing, in a sense, it's doing the same thing. It's just, again, creating a mechanism for which you can create this pressure gradient.
Exactly. I mean, but it is just that to me, in terms of concrete quantitative numbers, it's like the entropy sort of story. It has all the principles that you're talking about, but it's somebody's actually put numbers to it. Whereas my understanding is that the basic Lesage theory only gives you the 1 over r squared sort of inverse as the square formula.
Right. No, but that's what you're always going to be working with. It's a pretty simple mechanism, right? I mean, when you think about it, it's just a convergence, right? Technically, it's just a simple principle. I mean, there's a certain amount of dimple for a certain amount of mass, so it's a really simple relationship. So the fact that Einstein's equations are so complicated is a problem, because in a sense you're saying, well, if it's that simple, why do you have to use this math to explain it? And that's sort of where I'm going with this argument, that he doesn't do just the convergence of gravity. He's doing the convergence that includes time dilation and this concept of gravitational lensing. So he's adding elements to it, okay, and that's why the math is so convoluted.
Well, the chief thing is that the simplest math didn't meet the observations as well as Einstein's did, most famously with the orbit of Mercury, wasn't
it? But we know what's causing that, though. So the point is, the fact that they missed the fact that the sun is vibrating. Okay, the fact that Newton didn't include in his mathematics the vibrations created by mass that causes the distortion in the what do you call that? Not the parabola, but the you know what I mean? The distance-time relationship of the eccentricity of the what do you call it when you talk about the
ellipse?
Yeah, no, there's another word for the change in the ellipse. There's a word for the period of the change.
There's
the precession, right? So the fact that Newton didn't figure on precession, or understand it completely, I don't take. Yeah, this is one of those things where I'm saying, yeah, well, you're just refining 0.5% of Newton here. You're just, this is a tiny add-on to account for an effect that, yeah, okay, Newton didn't know that much about nuclear physics.
Well, it's very easy. It's very easy to talk or dismiss. That's it's easy for you to say that, but to actually forcefully say that, you have to actually revisit Newton's equations and show that actually.
Well, I don't have to. I don't think I have to, because again, I think Newton's the only equation that matters to me is the inverse square principle. And all I have to do with that is add on these other effects. I'm saying there's lots of other effects, okay? Effects that are created by bodies that are on fire, effects that are created, by how energetic the actual material is, how much it's actually moving as it's swirling. It's like gyroscopes, right? Now, if I took one gyroscope, okay, it has this I want to stay where I'm going effect, right? Now, if I take a bunch of gyroscopes and I start gyroscoping gyroscopes, right? I make a gyroscope out of gyroscopes, right? Can you get my analogy here? So fractal gyroscopes. So start off with little tiny ones going one way, build another one out of that, build another one out of that, and build another one out of that. So if I'm saying there's, say, 4 levels of atomic function going on, yeah, obviously the one we're seeing is just this last level. All right, we're seeing the big gyroscope doing this, and that's what Newton could see. I'm saying there's 3 other gyroscopes inside of these gyroscopes, levels of magnitude, and that's electricity and magnetism, and the nuclear forces. So we've got 4 levels of gyroscopes, and that's what has to be understood. So I'm just saying I'm going to use Newton's math, in the end, and all I'm going to do is add 3rd level gyroscope, 2nd level gyroscope, and 1st level gyroscope.
Yeah, I mean, you're hoping that you can do that, or somebody can do it, but you have to take the criticism as what it is. The criticism is.
I'm not going to take it. No, I'm not. I'm not going to. I don't. Punctuated equilibrium in evolution never had to be proven. Okay, all you had to do was say it, and it made so much goddamn sense. All right, that it became a fact. All right, all you had to do was just even suggest the idea that, oh yeah, it would make more sense that most of the evolution isn't happening in the giant herd that's diluting the genetic pool constantly, that most of the evolution would be happening in tiny populations that went to North America, for example, that crossed the land bridge.
You misunderstand me. I think you misunderstand me. When I say you have to hear the criticism, I'm not actually advocating that you have to put your hands up and say, oh yeah, I'm wrong, sort of thing. What I mean is, when I say the criticism is there, is you have to understand that people will have that criticism.
I'm not saying they're not entitled. I'm just saying that if somebody's going to give me a counter argument, okay, to punctuated equilibrium, I'm all ears. But the counter argument has to be something other than where's your math or where's your fossils. If you're going to say where's your fossils, I'm going to say, well, guess what? The very point I'm raising says there aren't any fossils. You're not going to have a missing link because the missing link took place in a population of 500 humans. Okay, and those 500 humans have absolutely 0 probability of being fossilized somewhere. Okay, because only 1 in 10 zillion human beings ever, or 1 in a billion, whatever the number would be, ever got fossilized. So obviously there's no chance that the missing link is going to show up in a fossil because he was a tiny population that lived thousands of years in one tiny region, and that's where the evolution took place. So I'm just saying the very thing you want may be something I can't provide, but let's see. I mean, math is math. Okay, fine. I give you a bunch of, again, I mean, it's almost ironic. Here we are talking about math invented, okay, and you're basically saying to me, where's your invented math? Well, yeah, okay, maybe I can invent some bullshit math like these other scientists are doing, right? Like this guy, I'm telling you, okay, he's going to be wrong. There's no single slit interference pattern. I mean, that's just a ludicrous proposition that a photon goes through the single slit and interferes with itself, right? Now that's just plain ludicrous, right?
And interferes with us.
I mean, if there's no 2 slits, there can't be 2 waves, right? I mean, will you grant me that much? Okay, if there's no 2 slits, there can't be 2 waves, so you can't tell me it interfered with itself.
Hmm. Now,
Well, I'm just saying, if I do the experiment with single photons, or as close as I can get to single photons, and I run them through the single slit experiment, and I get a wave interference pattern, okay, I get the traditional 1:9 ratio instead of 1:5 ratio in terms of the pattern, right? That's the only difference between the single slit and the double slit, is that the pattern is diminished in the single slit and it's emphasized in the double slit. So the single slit has a 1:9 ratio, and I think the double slit has a 1:3 ratio in terms of the maxima. The maxima don't get as weak as fast as they do in the single slit. But anyway, I'm just saying, if I do the single slit with single photons and I get an interference pattern, I'm just saying, I think I nailed the door that we're not talking about wave interference anymore.
That was what I was wanting to say. Just to go back to the punctuated equilibrium business, and you kind of suggested that, that this was like an immediately visible great idea, but according to Robert Sapolsky's lectures on the Stanford site, where he does behavioral biology, and he talks about evolution and DNA and all the different things that impact on your behavior, one being the evolutionary DNA.
I'm not too impressed by him, by the way, but go ahead.
But his account of the history of punctuated equilibrium is that it was laughed out of the room initially, but everything that it took generations of
Well,
discoveries.
I just know I first heard of it from Gould, and as soon as I heard it, I said, "Damn, that's the
Come
answer."
on,
I
let
mean,
me.
I can't say what people
If
did in
you're not going to let me
1930. I
speak,
can't say
if you're
what
not
people
going to
did
let,
in 1920. Well, I'm just saying. To me, it was a slam dunk. It's like I said. As soon as I read that book, I
let
was
me
like, "Fuck,
reply.
that's the
Let me
answer."
reply. But if every time you get to talk for 5 minutes, you know, I forget what I want to say, and I just sit here going, you know, I
All right. Well,
forgot
you're
what I
saying
wanted to say.
nobody thought it was intuitively brilliant. That's what you're saying. I'm just giving you my counter personal evidence that I found it incredibly intuitively slam dunk. I didn't need to hear anything more than the concept itself, and I said, damn, that's the puzzle piece. I don't need any math. I don't need anything else because it explains why there's no fossil record. But go ahead.
No, I would agree, but I just thought I'd raise that point. That the point is it's.
I know. Well, I'm arguing a theory that it was 200 years old. Okay, not a theory. Obviously, Lesage didn't have.
I would like to have a say on something.
Lesage didn't add electricity, magnetism, and time dilation, which I'm adding. Okay, that's a huge frickin' unified theory now. But anyway, let's ignore that. Yeah, Lesage said this 200 frickin' years ago, and they discounted it for silly reasons, in my opinion. Just absolutely silly reasons.
What can I say? I'm going to give you a take on something, right? And I'd like to finish the take, and I'll hear you reply.
Well, I think we got your point on the last thing. So you want to say I interject wrongly? I'm just saying I don't accept your premise, and I don't accept the argument as meaningful. I'm just saying I don't think it's relevant what the fuck other people thought. I'm saying it's intuitive based on what I think is a perfectly rational argument that's indisputable. It was fucking the most intuitive fucking thing I ever heard, so I really don't care that some other asshole said that doesn't make sense, because that doesn't make any sense to me.
Garrett, if you're not going to pay me a courtesy of let me speak.
No, it's not criticism. It's you want to have conversation. I don't think there's a need to have, because they're absolute non-starters. I will absolutely non-start on people thought. That is not a relevant argument to me. I don't give a fuck what people thought of anything. It's irrelevant to whether it's true or not. What I'm saying is, here is a theory of fucking evolution that doesn't need math. It doesn't even need a single kind of proof. All it is extremely explanatory. It explains the motherfucker so well, it doesn't need anything else.
Garrett, I don't even want to talk about whether they are criticisms or not. I just want to be able to speak for more than 30 seconds without being interrupted. I might be talking complete rubbish. I might be talking complete...
I will let you do this next thing you want to make, this next point. I will shut up and I'll let you be boring. Go ahead, be boring. Go ahead. Say something that's irrelevant that I don't give a fuck about. Have a conversation about shit I don't want to talk about. Fine, do it right now. Go ahead and do that.
That's called...
Thank you. Yes, or continue right now. Do it. Just shut up and get to the subject. Shut up and get to the subject. I'm giving you the floor.
I'm not going to come here to listen to you shouting and telling me how everything is.
Will you please shut up and get to your point? If you're going to argue, arguing. If you're going to argue, arguing, let's forget doing this. I will not argue about arguing. All right, whining.
All you have to do is watch this video again and how you've just gone on and on and on and on.
Go ahead,
and
shithead.
whenever I try to speak,
you don't
let me speak.
Flawless motherfucker. Fuck, fucker. Be boring, fucker.
Look, that's just hugely arrogant, yeah? You've agreed to come here to have a conversation with me. If I'm boring you, then you're the stupid one for inviting me here to speak with you, yeah? And if you can't take that I want to finish what I'm saying, the problem's solely with you, Gary.
Well, I'm sorry. Everybody watching this video is going to know perfectly what your point was. Everybody watching this video will know that I paraphrased your point correctly. I paraphrased it correctly. I eliminated it as the subject for conversation, and you refuse to have it eliminated as a subject for conversation.
Expose all your things and me just to be an earpiece for you. And I'm not here as an earpiece for you.
Whining. Okay, gutless again. Go ahead. I gave you the fucking floor and you won't take it.
I find it boring listening to being
Then fine. We have nothing to communicate with each other because I will not have my time wasted talking about shit that I don't think's on the table.
Well, you're analogizing with bloody evolution, and as far as I'm concerned, we'll end this because if you think I'm wasting your time, it was never. There's no point. But,
Exactly.
It's
goodbye. Yes, look, I gave you the fucking floor. You won't take it. You can't make a goddamn argument. You can't make a goddamn point worth a damn. All you said to me was, "Oh, look, nobody ever believes anything, and they didn't believe that, and that's not intuitive, and that's blah 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 blah." These are just whiny, nitpicky bullshits. Okay, I'm not going to argue what people thought of a theory. That's a waste of my goddamn time.
No, you'd get your say.
Professor Douchebag says in his bullshit lectures that he thinks this, that, and the other thing. Who the fuck cares what he thinks?
Never mind the rights and wrongs of it. You get your say after I finish.
You're not saying a damn thing. You're not making an argument specific to the subject. Is punctuated evolution an incredibly intuitive explanation of evolution?
If I'm off topic and it's not a good argument and all that aside, you get to say that after I finish. Yeah. If you can't let me. I don't understand that
kind of communication. I don't understand why I shouldn't be honest and just say, look, I don't think this is an argument. Let's move on.
Well, because I get to have a say. Yeah, and you get to say that afterwards. You don't get to interrupt. If you're so arrogant to think that I know what you're saying, to brush everything, these are my contributions, and I want to have those contributions. You might not want to hear them, but you can say that afterwards. But
look, and what did you do? You told me, okay, this is my grievance. I said to you, fine, I accept your goddamn fucking grievance. I don't agree with you. I'm accepting it. I said, you now have the floor, fucker. Go ahead. And instead of going ahead, you want to argue about arguing. I'm saying, fine, you feel aggrieved. Fine, I'm sorry I aggrieved you. I don't want to talk about that bullshit. So go ahead with your next damn point, and I'll let you finish. I said that. You didn't want to hear that. So I'm saying to you again, if you have a point to make it. I'll stay fucking silent and let you go all the way to the very end of your goddamn point.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, this conversation today is ruined because, we can try again on the basis, that we don't interrupt each other too much at another time. But I'm not feeling very conversational now because I feel even when you can't refrain from it. Yeah,
well, and you can't refrain from it. All you do is bitch. Okay, you can't refrain from it. I'm saying this is my nature. This is every conversation I ever have on the internet with any human being ever. I will interrupt them when they're off my subject. That's the truth. I won't waste my time for them to finish a paraphrase. When they finish a point, I already know. If I already know where they're heading, why should I wait till they get there? If I already know they're going to the White House, why should I just sit around and go, okay, they're walking to the White House, they're walking to the White House, they're walking to the White House. Why should I do that?
I'll tell you why. Because just like you say about your ethylism and antinatalism, you have to deal with people, right? And they come to the table expecting to have a say. And if you want to win your arguments and put forward and come across at all reasonable, you have to tolerate that.
Well, I did tolerate it. if somebody watches the beginning of this video, I was polite going through this. You're nitpicking, you're nitpicking, you're nitpicking. I didn't say you're nitpicking, you're nitpicking, you're nitpicking, but you're nitpicking, you're nitpicking, you're nitpicking. Everything I goddamn said, you nitpicked on. Every fucking point I made, you nitpicked on. So I took it, and then finally you're getting to this point where you're saying, well, look, this guy's even fucking disproved punctuated equilibrium. And I'm like, no, he didn't disprove shit. Punctuated equilibrium is the most intuitive piece of shit ever spoken in the human language, ever. And there's no way this is going to make any sense. So let's not bother with this nitpick, because this nitpick is a piece of shit, a piece of steaming motherfucking shit. No one with a scientific mind could have looked at punctuated equilibrium and said, that doesn't make sense. No scientist would ever say that. A religious kook might say it, but no scientist would ever say it.
Well, I wasn't putting forward anybody who'd said, Robert Sapolsky, that he said it's shit. Yeah? If that's what you thought, it proves that you interjected too quickly, because I wasn't saying that. I was just being conversational about the history of it. Right?
Yeah, right. And I'm saying that history is bullshit.
I'm saying
that history is bullshit.
It's conversation. Right? I didn't even broach it as a criticism, right? You know something about punctuated equilibrium, and I was telling you something that I knew about it. Yeah?
Right. In a nitpicky, diminishing, the insulting manner, in the sense you were sitting there making the argument that, oh, well, even punctuated equilibrium wasn't intuitive. I just said it was intuitive. Now you're counter-arguing its intuitiveness by bringing up Sapolsky, which to me is not a relevant argument, because there's no way it's not intuitive because Sapolsky says so.
I was talking about the history as put forward by him.
Again, the history put forward by him. By him.
Right. Okay, guys, this isn't working. You don't want me to have any say. As soon as I start to try, you characterized all my contribution about what I was going to say about it, and you haven't even heard it. Yeah? And as far as I'm concerned, you were wrong. I wasn't going to say what you thought.
I did. I heard everything I brought up. I heard you nitpick. Then I said, you have the floor. You've complained that you've been aggrieved and that you haven't been able to make your point fully. Well, go ahead and make your point entirely and fully, and then I'll just point out how it's another pile of shit.
All right, guys. All right. Shame we couldn't carry this conversation, because, but
you can't carry it, okay? I'm just fine. I'm going to stay in this room and I'm going to talk physics, okay? And I don't need a nitpicker to argue with me. I need somebody who has a real piece of fucking logic to argue with me.
I'm being very polite in these nitpicks.
Whatever. Yeah. You call it polite. It's a waste of my time is all I'm telling you. Arguing nitpicks is a waste of my fucking time.
Right. Well, ta-ra.
Good. So anyway, yeah, he wasn't going anywhere. So right, I mean, I brought up. So he actually had mentioned me about dark energy and matter. You know, just as a very small remark he made in the Skype thing, and I'm saying, okay, so he's got something to say about dark energy and dark matter. I brought up the subject. Did he say anything? Not a goddamn thing. You know. So. You know, he's arguing, he's conceding that physics is a shaky edifice of exaggerations, of almost a self-justifying. We have to come up with a way to make this the truth, so we'll invent some math to make it make sense. He understands the accusation that classical physics, as it's now defined, qubits and dark energy and multiverses, right? This is the new physics. That somehow this is, he'll concede that it's got a lot to do to actually be credible to somebody who actually is paying attention to what these guys are saying. I mean, yes, it all sounds good when you're making a documentary. All this bent this and crooked that, and these relationships and all sparky, and you can make a little light shine and blah, 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 and pretend that you're talking about something real when we know that the actual experiments aren't what they're describing. that it doesn't happen the way they say. Again, every explanation of the two-slit experiment you will see just sits there and says, yeah, when one slit's open, look, it's just a blob of light. And it's not a blob of light, okay? It's full of character. It's full of interesting effects. And these are the, and you can only, what can you call this shit? You can only call them lies, right? I mean, are the physicists who make this garbage documentary science, right? I saw a documentary where they used bowling balls, all right? And they were just, you know, and they were describing here, you know, exactly this phenomenon as if there is no single slit diffraction. And you're saying, well, what the fuck? This is just an overt lie, right? Is there any other word for it than lie? Because these guys are scientists. They goddamn sure fucking well know that they're single slit diffraction. So why have they been lying? Why for the last 3 years did I think they were telling the truth and find out now? No, that's a preposterous lie. That's not what happened. When Feynman said it, it was a lie. When all these guys said it, it was a fucking lie. I mean, why did Feynman in his lectures sit there and say exactly that? The bullet just goes straight through, blah, 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 blah. You know, he did it. He didn't talk about single slit diffraction, and he certainly didn't call it wave interference. So, I mean, you know, so he'll concede that the edifice that physics is now built on is crap. I sit there and suggest another theory, and then I explain how it fits all of these elements, and he just nitpicks. He just keeps bringing up how, no, you have to have this, you have to do this. And then I bring up an example of some other scientific theory that didn't require any mathematics, didn't require any convoluted nonsense. It just basically said, here's a model, okay, punctuated equilibrium that explains a huge amount of evolutionary facts. I mean, it accounts for all the little things you assholes have been bitching about. So anyway, you know, the missing links and so forth. You know, and I'd say that even punctuated equilibrium could have been expanded if it got more into what I think is the real cause of most accelerated evolution, especially in larger mammals, which was probably inbreeding. Was it create even more opportunity for mutation? So anyway. But to argue about arguing, it's just such a waste of time. I mean, you know, you're sitting here. I'm the protagonist or whatever the thing is. I'm the guy defending the theory, and frankly, I mean, I guess I think I have an entitlement to a little more respect rather than less. And you know, what's the, like I said, and especially if what you're going to throw at me aren't hard balls, but goddamn water balloons. I mean, he wasn't throwing hard balls at me. He was throwing fucking water balloons. I should waste my time hitting water balloons out of the park? You know what I mean? I can't win hitting the accusation that, well, you don't have a bunch of convoluted Einstein math. And until you have convoluted Einstein math, you don't have shit. And we just pointed out how convoluted Einstein math might be shit. It might be made out of absolute shit. So here he wants me to make shit math. If I make some shit math, then I have a real theory. But until you have shit math, you don't have a real theory. You know, I find that a preposterous starting point for rhetorical combativeness. And again, I was perfectly satisfied to have a conversation about how bad conventional physics was, and I was perfectly satisfied to keep pointing that out. But I mean, I'm just not satisfied with this fucking nitpick and naysay without something more than, and like I said, it always comes down to the same shit. Where's your math? Where's your math? As if mathematics is physics. Whether, you know, when we're talking about, you know, Einstein could show up with a theory of gravity that just has to do with this fucking visual metaphor of mass compressing space, dimpling space, however you want to, displacing space. So he didn't have to have a medium for this dimple. He didn't have to have a mechanism for the dimple. He didn't have to have any. He had to just say space does stuff. Space does all this magical stuff, and the matter obeys the space. So he could get away with doing that, all right, merely because he went a tiny bit further in terms of add a few more elements to Newton's inverse square rule of shadowing. And again, that's all we're talking about is a convergence. And so I'm saying, no, I have a better metaphor. The better metaphor is there's a bunch of particles that are pushing everything in a direction, and they shadow each other, and it perfectly accounts for the movement of bodies in space. And it also accounts for time dilation, by the way. And it also accounts for magnetism, by the way. And it also accounts for electricity, by the way. And I'm pretty damn sure it's going to do the nucleus some good, too. And so his counter argument, again, is what? What did he throw at me except, why aren't you doing it like all the other scientists? The ones who are lying. Yeah, why aren't you doing what the liars are doing? Don't you know that you have to do science the liar's way? Yeah, that's the only way you do science now. You do it the liar's way. Fuck. So anyway, I mean, I'm not big on live conversation anyway, to tell you the truth, unless somebody's got a whole big pile, until they got a list of real shit to throw at me, then what's the point? I'd much rather just do video exchanges if somebody's got something to say, or somebody wants to, if they want to speechify, well, then just make a video, and then you can speechify for 45 minutes or an hour and a half if you want. If you want to just make speeches, well, then fine. Go ahead and make a video. I wanted to do live conversation because I wanted some sort of real baseballs thrown at me, something really hard that I could go investigate and find out the answer to, something like that. And instead, all I got was water balloons. All I got was crap that, it doesn't do me any good. It's non-functional as an argument. It just has nothing to do with the circumstance I'm in terms of advocating for a theory. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. He's saying I have to have convoluted math. I'm saying no, the math is going to end up being simpler, not more convoluted. The truth of reality is simple, and all of these formulas they have are, extraneous. They're strangled in terms of their complexity, and I think they all, like E equals mc squared, I think they can all be reduced substantially into something much simpler in terms of representing the real dynamic and understanding that the real dynamic is happening on these different levels, and having math out here, okay, that accounts for everything going down is kind of silly, because you just can't do that. The math inside the nucleus is going to be a little different than the math outside it, and the math here and the math here, because the forces are all going to be different. The same force is going to be realized as differently because of how close it is, okay, in size to the entity it's affecting. So the effect on a nucleus by a graviton is entirely different than the effect on a nucleus, the effect on a planet by a graviton. And so dimensionally, not different in the sense that these two hands are far apart. No, it's different in that speed of light different. This is a universe of difference between, literally a universe of difference between those two scales. So anyway. So yeah, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. Besides, like I said, there's nothing. I'm not going to get anything from this interaction unless you can come up with something more than Sapolsky says. The history of punctuated equilibrium was full of divisiveness and conflict and blah blah blah. And I don't see how it's possible. A conflict by religious kooks, yes. Conflict by laymen, maybe. But I don't see how it's possible for a biological scientist somewhere in the last 130 years to see punctuated equilibrium as anything but a brilliant observation. A brilliant observation is the wrong word. A brilliant explanatory concept. Yeah. So anyway, that was fun. So I guess that's the end of the physics video. Phooey. Yeah, but it's always an argument video. Hotladay hasn't gotten that yet, right? So going all the way back with Hotladay, it's just kind of funny. Back to like Stickham days, like 4 years ago or whatever. He was supposed to have a big debate with Piro, and they spent the next 2 months arguing about how they were going to argue. who was going to be able to ask questions, how long the answers are going to be, how he just argued about arguing for 2 fucking months. And now he's again pointing the finger as if all the blame is on you and Mendham. It's your personality that's unacceptable. You're unacceptable. And the truth is, hey, Holiday, maybe you should queue up and realize that maybe you're a contributor to these personality conflicts, and that maybe you should do a little bit of bucking up, balling up, and saying, okay, I get you. Like I said, I let you have your complaint. I let you have your goddamn whine. I said, okay, here it is again. Somebody saying I'm talking too much. Okay, go ahead, shithead. I'll give you the floor. And you wouldn't take it. And it's just so damn annoying. Because what do you want me to do? Again, I'm already conceding this is who I am. I'm not hiding it from anybody, right? Everybody knows who Win-Mendham is and how he is. So what the fuck? What's your expectation, right? That I'm just going to sit here and say, okay, Holiday wants to tell a story. I know exactly where he's going, but I should just say, okay, let's do this story thing. For whose benefit? I mean, maybe the audience might like it. Okay, maybe they have a use for it. But frankly, I'm not doing this for the audience. This isn't like I didn't do this room for the purpose of even an audience. I did this room. Maybe I should just made it private or something. I don't know. Because the only purpose was to see if you did have something. Did you have some baseballs to throw? Or do you just have, it doesn't sound quite right to me. I don't buy it quite yet. I don't get it. No, it doesn't, it's not gelling. Is that all I'm going to get? Is it's not gelling? I don't know. I'm just sitting here saying, to me, from my own point of view, like I said, I can explain now the actual force. Instead of the force being magic space, I've got an actual force. I can explain the kinetics in the sense that I can explain that, guess what? These are particles that can't exchange size or momentum. They can only exchange direction because they're a fixed size. They will not get smaller or bigger when they go into an interaction, and they will not change their speed. So if they can't change their size and they can't change their speed, the only thing they can change is which way they're moving. And that's it. And that's explainable, and that's intuitive. It's motherfucking insanely intuitive to recognize that that would be what the constituent particles of the universe probably would be like. That the quanta would be something that, yeah, doesn't change its size, doesn't change its speed. And that, again, and we just, even when you say the word speed and you get to the idea that electricity, magnetism, gravity, the nuclear forces, all of them move at the speed of light. None of them move faster. They're all moving at the speed of light. And why are those forces moving at the speed of light? Because those forces are made of something we traditionally call light, a variation on what we call light. A variation of the electromagnetic spectrum happens to be a variety of electromagnetic particle that isn't detectable. You can't tune it in like a radio wave, right? You only can hear radio waves if you tune them in. Okay, you can only see light when you're tuning it in. You have to have a device that can tune for it. Okay, you can't just be anything. It has to be matter in a specific condition for it to interact with light. So yeah, and in the face of all that, like again, all you did was nitpick and naysay. That's my accusation, that there wasn't anything real. It was just, okay, Gary's going to sit through another hour or hour and a half of people just saying shit like, where's your math? And I don't like it. And that's it. Well, fuck that. Yeah, fuck that. Especially, like I said, in the context where I said basically, look, here's an experiment. If this experiment gets done, would you not concede that it blows up wave theory? Okay, if they do this single slit experiment and they get a diffraction pattern, isn't wave theory done? Isn't it cooked? Can we finally just say, fuck, that doesn't make any sense. You can't create two waves with one photon. and they can't interfere with each other. The one single photon can't get a phase shift and interfere with itself, can it? No, it can't. Not if it's going through one slit, because you have no explanation for where this second wave comes from. Even though the idea of waves, the idea of particles waving through two mass structures, actually creating a wave, which only gets created in mediums. Waves only exist in mediums. So let's, the fact that nobody's even recognizing that, how can you have a wave in a non-medium? So anyway. Yeah, so I don't have any of my criticisms answered, right? Traditional science has been lying about the two-slit experiment. He concedes the lie, and then he'll say, basically, well, any alternative theory is shit on its face because it doesn't have lie math connected to it. Oh, because I didn't make up some, let's take 1/3 of this and factor it by that and multiply it by this and multiply it by that, because I didn't find some convoluted puzzle math to mimic my circumstance, because I don't contrive math. At least I don't wish to contrive math. Therefore, I have no theory. Okay, that's enough of a speech. So anyway, I think if you're honest, you will just have to concede that there's a personality problem between me and Hathliday in terms of how communication takes place. And I'd say we're both traditionalists in the sense that we're not changing. It seems obvious. Hathliday has known about his communication problem for years. I have heard this whine from people that I talk too much for years, but I've overtly made videos saying, I don't give a fuck. If you don't like it, then don't talk to me, because this is how I talk, because I think I'm smart, and I usually think you're pretty dumb. I mean, it's just a fact, okay? If I thought somebody was going to tell me the truth, somebody was going to tell me something I didn't already know, or something interesting, truly interesting, I mean, profoundly interesting. Like if I thought somebody was going to come to me with a Lesage theory that they demonstrate why it really works instead of it fails, I'd be intensely interested. But that's not what anybody's telling me. Everybody just shows up with soggy cardboard and says, here, let's build a house out of this soggy cardboard. It's my theory of soggy cardboard. No, fuck you and your soggy cardboard theory. I mean, they're all wax. And I know this on its face, okay? Go ahead. Call me a raggy, we're just another one of those truth tellers who's living on the street eating dog shit. Yeah, okay, I have every appearance of being just another one of the old whack jobs talking shit. But my appearance is irrelevant. The shape or form of this messenger is irrelevant. What I'm saying is there's no fucking way to get around the fact that what I have argued here is significant. The fact that I have found time dilation in the mechanism of kinetics, in the idea that if you have particles that can only exchange directional information, you will change their metabolism, the metabolism of structures, if you oblige structures to move, because those structures have a metabolism. I've used the word, material metabolism, physical, for physics. It's a thing. Atoms have a metabolism. Conceptually, how could somebody argue with that? Isn't that really quite a brilliant thing to say, that yes, atoms have a metabolism. The particles are moving. They have a structure. And if you make them move more in space, that would have a consequence. Just logically, you can figure that if I'm taking something that's already moving as fast as it can, moving, and I move it some more, that movement is going to change the movement it's doing, because it can't move twice. It can't move twice the speed of light. It can't move any faster than the speed of light. And if the little bits are already moving the speed of light, I can't move them some more without changing how much they're moving now. Obviously, I can't take something, if it's moving the speed of light going around in an orbit this way, I can't move the body in that direction of its orbit at that moment, because it can't move faster than the speed of light. So it's still here. If I move the thing here, right? If I move the thing here and it's already going the speed of light in that direction, it can't go any faster. It can't get here by your demand. It has to do it some other way. And the other way it does it is that it moves slower when it's going this way. It has to overall, the whole thing has to change its metabolism to go from here to here. And I use this great metaphor of a school of fish, which just gives it total visuality. All right. And all I'm getting is, like I said, not to concede that this has a significant element of that might be right. This has that might be right. And only a dishonest motherfucker would say this theory doesn't have any that might be right. It has a big, huge ton of that might be right. Again, because it explains nuclear forces, magnetism, electricity, gravity. It unifies all of them, okay? Plus, it gives you time dilation. I mean, you can't get more fucking slam dunk than that. And what's the counter argument? I don't like it. Where's your lie math? And I'm not supposed to be frustrated. I'm not supposed to be irritated. Fuck that. Yeah, fuck that. I'm going to be frustrated and motherfucking irritated because no one's telling me why it can't be right. No one's shown me the experiment that demonstrates conclusively that it can't be right. Okay. Where I am saying, do the fucking single slit experiment with weak photons, over time photons, one photon at a time. Do the single slit experiment, one photon at a time, get your fucking diffraction pattern, and then explain to me how it's wave interference. Go ahead and give that a try. And because you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to explain diffraction as fucking wave interference. And as long as scientists says, I didn't realize they were doing that. I didn't realize they were they were accounting for particle diffraction, light diffraction as wave interference, right? It's a single slit, and they're arguing that the light's interfering with itself. Well, it's partners, right? So they're going with the beam of light thing. So again, if I do the tiny aperture experiment with single photons, how come they still get diffracted? Oh, how come your math wouldn't work now? Your wave interference bullshit doesn't work anymore, does it? No, it doesn't. You have to account for what bent the photons. And then they'll just use Heisenberg crap, right? So again, we're right back to waves, right? Heisenberg is just waves. Heisenberg is, I'm not going to say where it is. It's just blah, blah, blah. It's doing this here thing. It's just blah, blah, blah. Bullshit. I'll have to see how they explain lensing, pinhole lensing. Let's see if they see what the explanation of that is. I'm just saying a small aperture diffraction is a fact. That's been a fact for a long time. And I'll have to see what they're using as the explanation for why those rings would be created when it's single photons. Yeah. How would that happen with a single photon? How does the single photon go through the single hole and interfere with itself? Create two waves that interfere with each other. How does it do that? That's my question to you. Nitpickers, naysayers, tell me how that's possible. How is it possible for a single photon to interfere with itself going through a single aperture? Yeah, explain that, please. And then tell me I'm full of shit. But until you explain that, I'm not accepting you're full of shit. I'm not accepting, I can't, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what that is. I don't think that's a theory. No, I can't, no, it's not a theory. It's just blah, 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 blah. That's all I hear. I just hear blah, 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 blah. I don't hear nothing. That's how holidays act. I don't hear nothing. Yeah, I'm not supposed to get sick of this shit. I don't hear anything. Yeah, fuck you. Yeah, fuck you. I mean, what? I'm going to waste my time listening to somebody just say, I don't hear you. Yeah, no, I'm not going to bother doing that. All right. So this was fun anyway. So it was, yeah, it was just so, I just, I had this feel, okay, Hustle Day, we're sort of getting each other a little bit. We're sort of understanding how to play with each other. And we did get away with it. I mean, we did do okay for like 20 minutes, right? Or 15 or 10. I mean, it was some amount of minutes. We did okay. And, but yeah, it's a little, whatever the button push is, right? And it just seems, again, this whole argument that I shouldn't interrupt. If anybody looks at my interruptions over time, right? I mean, just really is honest to my interruptions. 95 at least percent of the time, they're dead on interruptions. They're just interruptions. It's just going to save time because I already know where you're going. If I know where you're going, why should I just sit here and wait for you to get to the punchline? If I already know the punchline to the joke, why wait for the whole story? I mean, isn't that just slowing everything down? Isn't that just fucking preposterously inefficient to wait for somebody to start with a false premise, make a silly argument, go to Goldilocks's house, I should listen to the whole bullshit, and then I get to say, well, look, I don't believe in Goldilocks. I don't believe the three bears ever existed. I don't believe there's a road to her house anyway. I've never seen any such fucking goddamn road. What town is this fucking place in that Goldilocks lives? What are you talking about, motherfucker? I don't accept any of your premises. This is just a waste of my goddamn time. So take your story and shove it up your ass. So I should wait till he tells the whole story before I say, fuck you, I'm going home. I'm not listening to this. It's crap. It doesn't mean anything to me. Do not start a fucking story with, and then Goldilocks. Don't do that. If you're going to start a story with, and then Goldilocks, no. I don't have any obligation to listen. I don't have an obligation to listen. Do I really? That's like saying I have an obligation. And God said, who the fuck cares? No, I'm not doing that. All right. Now, I believe I'm completed. So, well, an hour and a half, an hour and 20 minutes. So, yeah, whatever it is. So maybe I'll do another one of these and hope we can get some real guests. Yeah, another shot at half a day. Somebody with some real fucking physics. Come on, man. Throw some real things. Throw fucking cannonball at me. Throw something real material fucking science at me. Don't just throw people's reputation at me. Einstein said with a bunch of convoluted, bizarre math. And see, that's it again. Like I said, he brought up dark matter, which had me thinking about Einstein. I'm just saying, I brought up the lensing argument. I mean, I think the lensing thing is crap. I think they've assumed that lensing has something to do with gravity when it's a consequence. It's related to gravity, not created by gravity. Gravity creates the circumstance that creates the lensing, but there's no direct relationship between gravity and lensing. There's only a direct relationship between the massive bodies and particle fields. So anyway. So in general, I'm just going to say I think I'm behaving reasonable under the circumstances. Yeah, I think I am. Because this is really difficult. And it probably should be. I'm not saying it shouldn't be. But it is a difficult position to be in. And I'm getting no help from people who I think should be logical enough to say, wait a minute, that does make sense. Let's work on that. I mean, Hotley is smart enough to say, he's smart enough to say, yeah, this might be more than just a grain. Okay, this might have real balls. Give this a little bit of work, and this might be the answer. Instead of saying that, which I know that's what he should be saying, there's no logical reason for him not to be saying it. But it's like I said, didn't the conversation point out he doesn't have a real objection? His objection is the authorities say no. And doing that in the very conversation where we've already pointed out that the authorities are suspect. So isn't that kind of duplicitous and manipulative? I mean, to say the authorities aren't wearing any clothes and then talk about how well dressed they are the next minute. Come on. Sapolsky says, duber, blah, 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 informs us. I just don't want to do this name droppy thing. I'll do the Einstein says, and I'll do the Newton says, and I'll do some of that shit because you have to. But all the rest of them, fuck what they say. I mean, I'll even tolerate what Feynman says, but I mean, I'll do Feynman says in the, you know, in the box where I get to point out where Feynman, by his own words, told bullshit, gave people a lecture full of shit. In his where in his own lecture, at the end of his own lecture, he admitted, yeah, I left out the most important detail, which was, yeah, this stuff isn't really bouncing off the surface or the bottom surface. The surface is bullshit. This stuff is going through the material and bouncing out all through them. Yeah. So a fundamental, huge, gigantic fact, okay, is obliterated, just thrown away for the sake of, well, I'm doing a lecture and I want to have continuity and I want this all to flow along. So yeah, and that gets a little bit too messy. So I'm not going to mess with that because it makes the math look complicated. It's not as much fun. So because it's not as much fun, I'll just tell a fucking goddamn Goldilocks story instead. Oh, the single slit, the stuff just goes blobbity blob blob blob. It, yeah, it doesn't diffract. No, it doesn't have a pattern. It just goes blobbity blob blob. I mean, fuck. These are like gigantic fucking Eiffel Towers of lie in physics. And then this asshole tell me, no, I'm not getting it. You got nothing. Oh, fuck. Too irritating. All right, so now I think I'm done. Yeah, I got to find somebody who, like I said, I mean, $1,000. I've got to offer a higher price, or I need somebody who's got some real fucking hard ass physicist shit or something. I need somebody to make an argument I can't deal with decisively. And I think they're decisive. I mean, like I said, the argument from I need convoluted math, I just think is absolute bullshit. Inverse square all the way down. There, am I done now? I mean, yes, I will have math eventually for the two-slit experiment. I think it's obviously sitting there saying we're just waiting for a better formula than this theta angle thingy, of using the wavelength to explain the phenomenon by saying they're in phase or out of phase. So it's not about the phase. It's clearly about the closeness of the particle to the slits. And the closer you are, there's a proportional functional, what's the right word to use? Well, anyway, the closer you are, the more you're going to be affected in your direction, the more probable a substantial shift in direction will be. And then all I have to do is explain them little dark lines, yeah, the little empty spots. But like I said, that's what I'm saying is there's a proportional, but proportional means that it always has to go to an increment, like on a clock. It has to go to an increment. And those are the field lines, probably. But anyway, that's a whole nother subject. Well, it's exactly this subject, but I'm just saying, so that's a math I think I can do, because all you're really doing is, it's the same variables. There's the width of the slit. There's the dynamic of the photon itself, which means, what wavelength is it, which means how many of them are going by a circumstance that's, how they're going to interact with the electron. The wavelength of the photons only matters in the fact that I'm arguing that these photons are interacting with physical matter, and that's changing their direction. That photons aren't changed in that direction by anything other than physical interaction with electrons. So I just have to explain that there's more electrons on the edge of the slit. The further away you go from the slit, the less electrons you're going to interact with. So the closer they bring the slits together, the more likely the photon's going to interact with electrons. And that's where the wavelength matters, because to change the wavelength, you change the pitch of the refraction. And that's where the pattern changes. Okay, so there's a little specific physics. But anyway, so I'm just saying that the math is just basically these are the only things you have. You have the distance from the slits. You have the, I think the coherency of the light also matters, whether the light's polarized, how coherent it is, whether you really have a completely probabilistic, smooth probability of photons in all areas. So the same number of photons hit every bit of space in the two slit area. I think that is important. And because obviously most of these light sources have an intensity at the center. Here, down here. They have an intensity at the center and a weakness at the fringes. And so that's also important in terms of when it's going through a slit, what's going to happen to that light. But that's all you have, right? You have the distance, you have the width of the slits, you have in the two-slit experiment, the distance of the impediment, which is smaller than the slits. And you have the distance from the source, and you have the distance to the target. And yeah, that's it, right? And the wavelength of the light. So all you're doing is contriving mathematics. And I will say it's contriving in a way. I'm going to take those variables, and instead of worrying about wavelength shifts, I'm going to convert wavelength shifts into atomic deflection or electron interaction. And so as the electrons interact with the wavelength, it changes the amount of deflection, the deflection in the path of the photon. The photon is changed based on what kind of photons, and they're always pairs, interact with the electron. So anyway, so it's the same variables. So all you're doing is coming up with some other math that doesn't account for it happening. See, the stupid wave theory accounts for the interaction out here in the wave, okay, which I think they already know doesn't happen anyway, right? Because in the ones where they use an interfractor, where they use the mirror that's two double-sided, you know what I mean? The mirror that half the light goes through and half the light reflects off of it, and they call it like interfractor, whatever it is. Anyway, when they do those experiments, where they do all the bouncing off the mirror shit, and they end up with the circular patterns because they don't bother with the slits. But anyway, they found that the light from the dark areas, from where it was supposed to have destructively interfered, and that means somehow the photons got destroyed. Well, they actually didn't get destroyed. They actually get bounced back to the laser, which is, it's just kind of funny that the mirror goes from being 50% reflective, half go through, half reflect, gets converted into essentially 100% reflective. And so that's the more interesting thing, is that the photons never even got to the target. They didn't go to a wave and then come back. Yeah. All right. So anyway, so where am I? But yeah, all the light's accounted for. It actually goes back to the source. I mean, it goes back, and as you would expect, the dark lines, the light isn't nowhere. It's actually somewhere. If it didn't go there, it went somewhere else, and that's the irony. But anyway, in that experiment. But each one of these experiments has all these nuances, right? Because these are done with lenses and mirrors, and mirrors are always a little suspect, right? Mirrors do sneaky things. What point do I want to make? But yeah, so you're just talking about some variables, and all I have to do is account for it happening in a different. It's not the wave, the interaction, the diffraction pattern is not being created out here in some wave where you're required to bang waves into each other. The diffraction's happening right at the slit. It's happening instantaneously. As soon as it gets to the damn slit, its destiny is already decided. It doesn't need to make any damn wave to decide where the photon is going. It's going where it's going when it hits that slit. It hits that first electron it crashes into. Its destiny is decided. So anyway, that's enough of this shit. I said that before, but it's nice I rounded it off to an hour and a half. Yeah, it's nice to have an even number, right? It's good for the math. The math looks better if you have little round numbers and shit. Yeah. So anyway, till next time. When I find somebody who would like to argue physics and isn't a fucking pussy. Yeah, fucking, you didn't let me finish my Goldilocks story. I was totally going to annihilate you with my Goldilocks story. So like I said, just go back on the video and see where I interrupt him and see if he was heading anywhere but gingerbread house. Okay, that's all. Just see. You'll be able to see he was just heading for another gingerbread house that said, "I don't like it" on it. That's all. Another piece of candy as an argument. Another little whiny piece of synthetic mushy nothing as an argument. Nothing with balls. No, this is why what you're saying can't be true. No, just another. Well, you know what? People thought this and people have thought that all through history. All of them have been wrong all through history. The first people who invented toilet paper, it was too rough, and then the second people invented it was too spiky, and then they blah 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 blah, and they're never going to make perfect toilet paper. I mean, it's just this kind of crap, right? I mean, these assholes who keep saying because they got it wrong in the past, that means we're going to get the answers always wrong. Because the first people who did math said 2 plus 2 equals 43. I should have said just 3. That means everybody's going to get math wrong forever, and they're never going to figure out that 2 plus 2 equals 4. No, they're going to figure it out. And so I find those, I guess, just such irritating arguments that, oh, well, blah, 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 they don't blah, 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 they don't blah, blah, you know, fuck, who cares what they did in the past? I mean, the only thing relevant is again, like I said, this poor Lesage guy 200 years ago came up with a perfectly rational material explanation for gravity, and these assholes dismissed it because they had no vision whatsoever. And admittedly, it took a little bit of vision. You had to have a little bit of understanding, and you had to think for a minute about the fact that, no, these things aren't going to bang into things like meteors bang into Earth, and it breaks the meteor into pieces and pieces fly off and all that. No, it's not the same dynamic. They can't break. If the thing can't break and it can't change its speed, god damn them, their solution has been arrived at. Then the only thing that can be exchanged is direction. And direction is all the information in the universe is just directional information. See, he loves to talk about this information theory shit. And that's it. It's right there. The only information in the universe really is directional information. The particles are moving, they're banging into each other, they're changing direction. So every single thing in the universe is, all the stuff you're made out of, all the little tiny bits, all have a directional history. And yeah, it's a really long history, but I just mean all they've been doing is banging into things forever. That's it. Now I'm done. All right, now I went overtime, so now I have an odd number. Yeah, I might start 6 minutes late, so that might just be just right. Okay, so I did that.